Do you ever wish things would just move faster? You wish you could get to that goal now, be good at something now, have money now, have the life you want now. Do you ever just feel like things are not going the way you want? Well, you're in luck because today we're going to talk about really patience and contentment on the Existential Stoic podcast. This is episode 127. I'm Danny. I'm here with my buddy Randy. What's up, Randy?
Hey, Danny.
Yeah, so this is a topic I think we both, I think everybody struggles with all the time. But I mean, what do you think about this patience and contentment? I mean,
Yeah, I
what
mean, if you're anything like us, it's a constant struggle because there's where you
yeah.
are right
Yeah.
now. And, the definition of wanting something or wanting to be somewhere,
Yeah.
someplace is somewhere where you're not right now. So if you
Yeah.
don't take the time to appreciate where you are right now, you'll just spend your time miserable because wanting things, which is essentially what we do all the time, can be making a contract with yourself to just be miserable until you get that thing you want. And then that just becomes a habit, being
Where you
miserable. And
just
then you're just stuck.
yeah, you're just stuck in a cycle. Well, you know what too, and it's funny too, because it's like I feel like that's what happens where it's like you live mentally in the future thinking about this life that you're making or whatever that you want, and that whole time you're miserable now, missing out on now. You're not living in the now. You're constantly feeling like you're not getting enough done. You constantly feel like you're never getting those things ticked off quick enough or fast enough, or you're not progressing fast enough, and it's overwhelming and frustrating as hell. It is. It really is hard sometimes. And I mean, I feel this way a lot. I've been feeling this way like past week especially, but like I think it's hard to find that balance of you know being happy now, saying yes to now, and like being grateful for what you have, but also keeping that motivation, because I think part of my fear, at least, and I'm sure this is you too, is that losing that momentum, that if you get too complacent in now, you'll lose the momentum that's pushing you forward to those other things, because it's like a tricky thing, sometimes, like that that progress, that momentum, that desire to keep pushing yourself, it also can be shut off very quickly, or at least that's the fear, is that it could be shut off quickly.
Yeah, I think it can. It's kind of like Aristotle's virtues, where you're trying to find the happy medium between virtue and
Yeah.
vice, or between like two ends. Because on one hand, you have losing momentum, but on the other hand, you have never being content, and you kind of have to try and strike the golden mean between the two. And geez, it's difficult because you go too far on either end, and it's no fun.
Yeah. Oh, it's funny, that whole idea of the golden mean and balance, like it does work for almost everything, I think, because most of the time I think that's what our problem is, right? Is 90% of the time, I think, that's what I always liked about virtue ethics, is like you're out of sync and you're trying to get to that balanced middle state. And I think most of the time that's our problem. We're too focused on one end of the spectrum, and we're not in that happy middle where we
Mhm.
would be, theoretically good. But it's a real fear, a fear of mine. I know you've expressed it before too, this idea of losing momentum though too. Like if you don't, it's almost like, I don't, it's hard to describe sometimes too. It's almost like if you stop focusing on the wanting, there, that motivation, the will to keep pushing will go away.
Yeah.
And it can happen. Yeah.
Yeah, like I look back on times in my life when I've taken my foot off the gas, and I do regret it a little bit because I know that I was heading in the right direction, and then I kind of stopped. But on the other hand, if I didn't, I wouldn't be where I am today, and I'm quite happy about where I am today. So there's nowhere to say exactly
Yeah.
where it'll get you. So yeah, I think it's somewhat important to see both sides of it.
And that's the hard thing too, is you got to see both sides, I think, of it. But you're right. Like you know, it also feels good to get things done, I think, too. And this is the other difficulty, because we're pretty much raised to see, accomplishment as, akin to personal value and self-worth.
Totally.
And I think, so achievements, whatever those achievements are, they can be literally anything. I don't think there's any like specified achievements, but like achieving things becomes a way to validate our existence, validate our lives, feel good. And so it's like there's also this sense in which, pushing through, even though you might not be enjoying now, it might be miserable, but you're still getting these things done. So you have this, like, it's almost like a larger sense of self-worth, that even though you're miserable in the moment, you're still happy with yourself because you've gotten all these things done and you push through where it's hard, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I can totally relate with that because I remember back in high school, like I never felt good enough, and so I just made up a contract with myself in my mind. I was like, well, then I'm going to achieve this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, so that way I'll show them. And so
Yeah.
it's kind of funny because I realized that, and I achieved those things, and it didn't really make a difference. Like it really all it took was me just choosing to love myself, and that was all, you know.
Yeah,
But
that's all I really.
it's funny how we go through these paces. And there's a saying that all a man's problems come from his inability to sit still and do nothing. And so
Yeah.
I oftentimes think of that about that when I feel like I'm just like struggling to keep afloat, trying to keep my head above water. I'm like, maybe I should just stop, because
Yeah.
maybe where I'm going isn't helping, or maybe it's not doing anything. And there's both sides of looking at it. But a couple of things that I heard recently that, like, it's only 10% of what happens to us in life is only about 10%. What we make of it is the other 90%. So
Oh
like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, so not
The
really
meaning
take,
we give it. Yeah, yeah.
but the thing is, the meaning that we give it, we blow it out of proportion all the time. We're like, I haven't
Oh yeah,
achieved it
yeah,
fast enough. That means I'm a failure. I'm never going to do this. I'm worthless piece of
yeah.
garbage. And so, like, it's all this stuff that the meaning that we associate with it. So there's that one thing. And then another thing that I heard today was like, well, take a look at all the stuff that you've done in your life. And like most of the things that you've accomplished now, sometime previously you wanted to accomplish them. They seemed like very hard to
Yeah.
accomplish, but you got there. So like whatever problems you have now, just imagine, in 3 years' time, you'll have it handled. So like
Yeah.
you can take the pressure off of yourself. You can take the worry off of yourself. It's going to happen. It's just like it's done. It's in 3 years. It's done. Just chill.
Well, yeah, and that really is the problem of the meaning we put on it, the way we think about it. We tend to blow things out of proportion. We do. We don't think of things in terms of like it's like we think of a problem like, oh, I want to get out of debt, or I want to learn this new skill. We think of the thing we're trying to do, and then we immediately expect results the second we put our minds to it. And we think we're failures when we don't get it immediately, rather than the reality of the situation, which is it'll probably take a few years to get there, realistically. But we'll get there, and there might be bumps along the way. That's the other thing that's funny, it's like a lot of times I feel like, we pursue something and we expect there to be no obstacles, even though, like, one, those are where you learn things. Those are where you show that you have actually like are able to overcome these things in the future again. But also too, like, they're just gonna be there. Like there's always gonna be resistance. I think it's in Taoism. I think that and this is like a total, like, this is verbatim from anything, but like where they say basically you have all you need to be happy now. We have everything we need to be happy. We just basically prevent ourselves from it by focusing on the wrong things, or focusing on the wrong kind of you know expectations or whatever. We're kind of in this, like, construct of a life of human society that puts all this stuff on us, and we focus on that rather than focusing on what's important, or focusing on just being alive and existing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, all of your happiness, if you can't have it now, then how are you going to have it some other time? Like
Yeah, yeah.
it's not something that exists outside of you. And even like I heard this thing about, like, when you wake up in the morning, uh check your teeth. And if you don't have a toothache, well, be grateful you don't have a toothache. Because if you ever had a
Yeah.
toothache, that hurts a lot. So like you can wake up in the morning and be like, hey, no toothache. All right, this is good. And it's a great way to kind of change your perspective on life.
No, I like that one too, because it's also like that idea that we totally fail to be grateful for the things that we do have, or in this case don't have, like not having a toothache, right? Having good health, essentially. How often are you actually grateful that you have good health? How often do you even think about it? I mean, those are things that we take for granted so fast until there's a problem. It's until, like, the one day you feel tired or you feel sick and you're like, wow, and this is horrible, blah. But you weren't thankful all the days before that when that wasn't the case. You weren't grateful that you had your health. And I think this is the other difficulty that we face, which is we tend to focus on these things beyond the moment, achieving these things or whatever. And we also sort of forget what we have. or, you know, because we're focused on wanting something. So we're focused on adding essentially, not,
Mhm.
you know, and we're not looking at what's already present, all the
Yeah.
skills, all the things, all the great relationships, all the sunrises, sunsets, everything, you know, all that stuff, you know?
Even just going around your room, I do this from time to time, and I'm like, oh,
Mm.
Nintendo Switch, I have it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Oh, these books that I wanted, I have them. Thank you. Oh, living in this place that I love, I have it. Thank you. Oh, these little models that I love to paint, I have them. Awesome. Love it. Thank you. And just like going around wherever you are and seeing the things that you have and how awesome they are because these are things that you wanted and you got them.
And you know, it's funny. That's a good exercise too, because I actually do the same thing. And you know, I don't even realize I'm doing it sometimes, but I do it anyway. And it's like, it is a great exercise too, because it reminds you that they're there. It reminds you to be grateful. It also reminds you in some cases to use them.
Mm-hmm.
Because like a lot of this stuff too is like, especially like, you know, like the models you paint or something, or like, you know, like even for me, especially like photography and stuff, it's easy to forget that it's there and use it, and to not benefit from it as well, just because you already have it. And it's like that idea of like acquisition being the final goal when it's not, you know, obviously it's, you know, getting something's great, but it's actually the what we get from it when we use it, you know, that actually is really the value. And
Yeah.
I think it's, you know, it's like that'd be like, you know, pining over a Nintendo Switch for a long time, then getting it and never using it. It's like, oh, it's, you know, you have it. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I like what you say there about like the using it that's important. And you also mentioned earlier kind of like the goal setting, how we have these goals and we don't enjoy the process because I think that's important. Like I think we've defined the target uh wrong, calling it goal
Yeah.
setting because the goal is like the last 1%. After you've done the 99% work, you get that goal, which is the last 1%. And really, I think we're wrong in goal setting. Instead, it would probably be better to be journey setting. Like, figure out what journey
Yeah.
you want to go on for the next 10 years that'll get you to this goal that you want, but choose the journey. And I think this is one of the biggest problems that people have in choosing careers because they choose a career that they think will be a good goal, but then they don't actually realize
Yeah.
what that entails. Like for me, the problem
Yeah.
with that was when I was young, I loved animals. And so people told me, you love animals, you should be a veterinarian. And stupid me, I
Right.
listened to them, you
Yeah.
know? But here's the thing, a veterinarian, for the most part, is very location dependent. You can't move anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
You work really hard, like 60-hour plus weeks, barely, oftentimes not even able to get 2 weeks in a row vacation. So like you're stuck right there. And me,
Yeah.
I like to travel and I like location freedom. So it wasn't a good fit for me. But
No.
because I chose it for a goal instead of like the journey, the using of it, I there was a big problem. And so that's why now I choose computer programming because that's a location independent career as opposed to one where you're totally dependent on location.
Yeah, isn't that funny too, though? Because it's like, one, you're listening to people who, none of which are actually vets. So none of them could tell you anything about what it is to be. But it's also like, no, you know, and I look, I don't blame anybody for this because I think we've all probably, I think most people will probably experience at some point in their life some dissatisfaction with the career choice they made because you're making it so young. And it's really hard to even you don't have enough life experience to even like think about what, you know, one, you don't even know what you want either. That's the other problem. It's
Mhm.
like I don't think there's much of a there's not that doesn't say anything against you, but it does point to that issue of like, I think you're right. You know, we should think about the how am I going to use this? How's it going to be part of my life? Instead of, because the other problem is we think of these goals as our life. As that's it, you know, I'll be a
Totally.
doctor. As if that's like
And
that's
then I'll
it,
be
right?
happy.
And it's
And then my
yeah.
financial problems will be gone. And then I'll live happily ever after.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But if you're an unhappy doctor, chances are your financial problems will still be there because you'll be blowing money to make yourself happy, right? And like all this
Doctors are
other
some of
stuff.
the
It's
worst off people financially because
yeah,
they earn a high income, but they end up blowing it all on a high income lifestyle.
yeah. And it's like, you know, it's funny, but like we don't see these things a lot of times. You know, it's one of my friends, his brother, I mean, he makes, you know, makes very good money in tech industry out in California. And I remember it was funny because like we were talking the one day and he was saying like, you know, like he used to buy jeans that were like $100. And then he started making more money. So he bought jeans that were $300. And then like five, and it's like it's like you never have money because you just keep increasing exponentially the cost of the things that you're purchasing to match the income level. And it's like, it's really funny because it's like you're still stuck in this cycle, right? Where you're broke or whatever, even though
Mhm.
you're making like what most people consider an extremely good income. And it's funny. Yeah.
Absolutely. So then how do we bring patience and contentment into our life? Because it's so easy to be impatient, and it's so easy to
Yeah.
not have contentment, to be dissatisfied because we don't have these things that we want. Here's another thing about wanting. I often, like everybody thinks that it's when when we get the object of our wants, that's when we feel good. But I've heard it said another way, that is actually the disappearing of the want that's the feel good feeling. So you don't actually need to get the thing you want in order to have that want go away. You can also let go of the want, which is another way of getting that same good feeling. Because most of the time, that want goes away once we get the thing, and oftentimes then we forget about it within 2 days. So if instead of
Hey,
getting that thing, you just focus on letting go of the want for it, then you can have it now.
and that's very essential to Taoism, just to bring it back to that too, right? The idea of getting rid of all those desires, getting rid of those wants, because those are what are causing us the impatience, the feelings of distress, the feelings of being overwhelmed or lack of control or whatever. It's all these things we're putting on ourselves, all these wants, all these expectations for the future, rather than being happy with what we have now.
Well,
Yeah.
Lester Levinson, he was the guy behind the Sedona method, and he said, whenever you want something, either get it or let it go. And I think,
Yeah.
like that's something that now I can see that like there's such wisdom in that, because it's like, yeah, like either just get it or let it go. Because what most of us do is we keep it at like arm's distance away from ourselves. We're like, I want this thing,
Yeah.
but I'm not willing to put in the work to actually get it. Uh, but I'm not willing to let it go either. And so you're just stuck in limbo, wanting this thing and being dissatisfied because you don't have this thing. So, and I think that, like a lot of people who listen,
Well,
especially younger people, or maybe people who haven't gotten everything that they wanted in life, they think that getting everything you want is going to make you happy. Look at how well that's worked out for like Justin Bieber and every other celebrity who's like
yeah.
terribly depressed. They've gotten
Yeah.
everything they could have possibly wanted, and they're depressed. And you're like, but if it was me, it would be different.
Yeah.
But like I've read Will Smith's biography, and he said the same thing, that he like once you realize that money isn't the problem, then you realize that you're the problem, and you're even more depressed than you were without money.
Yeah, yeah, and it's funny too because it's a good point. I think it's something that's hard to swallow sometimes because again, like because we don't want to face ourselves. I think we want to turn it external, and I think another side of that too is we want to like holding on to those wants and pining over them even though we're not putting in the effort to. A lot of times too, I think is also this like cycle of negativity, victimization, all of that, blaming others, blaming the circumstances rather than looking at what we can do. And I think a lot of it is hard because the hardest part of it is it's turning back on ourselves and being honest with ourselves about, like who we are, about what we have, our happiness, our attitude, all these things that are within our control. It's so much easier to kind of focus on the external and to kind of just be miserable, right? It is in a sense. And I think that's part of the problem too.
Yeah.
And I think, trying to be patient and trying to be content or be happy with what we have, or to get rid of these desires that are unnecessary. It's also to recognize that it keeps happening. Like I keep experiencing this. It's not like it's like no matter how much I put a lot of effort into trying to overcome it, I put a lot of effort into trying to be aware of it. And being aware of it's super helpful. Like we talked about this before, acknowledging your emotions and stuff. It's super helpful because at least you're aware that it's happening and you're making a consider of it. But don't think too like it's like a goal where it's just going to go away. I think this keeps coming up because we live in a society also in our world where there is this focus on achievements and stuff and this end and this all these things that are take a long time. So it's going to happen, but part of it's just getting comfortable with the process too.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
it's part of the human condition. Like I watched this
yeah,
video on YouTube about some guy talking about like the feeling of emptiness, and how it's just like it's a part of being human. All of us have
yeah,
this hole that we keep trying to fill. We try and fill it with love, and we try and fill it with other people's approval, and we try and fill it with drugs, and we try and fill it with food, and we try and fill it with possessions and all these different
Yeah.
things. But it's like, it's part of the human condition, just having this hole within you and just recognizing that it's going to be there and being gentle and caring with it, like being like, oh, there you are again, part of me, my little hole that will never be filled. All right, what do you want this time?
Yeah, rather, I mean, and I think, we've talked, this is a long time ago, I think, but, maybe one way to do it is to like to check yourself, and how you're talking to yourself is always important. I think, ask yourself, am I talking to myself like a friend would talk to, like I would talk to a friend, or am I talking to myself like a maniac? Because I think most of us, it's like a maniac, like the language we use. It's like, you're a failure, you suck, I can't, blah, 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 all this stuff. It's like very, intense and hateful and all, that you would never speak to somebody else like that. So I think that's one important thing, is checking your internal dialogue often is important, because
Mhm.
that's how we work ourselves up into, this negative sort of hole of depression.
Yeah, and I like to be kind of like funny about it, like, oh, you silly bunny, there you go again.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's
Because
just like,
it is stupid. It is. It's just. I mean, it is. It's comical in a way,
yeah, because
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't get an instruction manual with this life, and nobody really knows what they're doing, and we're all
Literally,
just trying.
no one knows how to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, we're all just
Yeah.
doing the best we can with the situation we have and the means that we have at this time. And so,
Yeah.
like, I mean, that's just what it is. So why bother getting angry with yourself and taking it so seriously, and just be like, okay, cool, let's learn again. Another
Yeah.
another chance to learn. Here I go. Look at me, a great learning machine.
Well, I think too, that kind of attitude gets you more about like enjoying the process, enjoying the journey. It takes the pressure off. Because I think that's part of it. We put this pressure on ourselves, these expectations. One that I think realistically, like, they might come from external sources, but for the most part, no one has those extremely, realistically, no one has that perfection expectation of you. No one has, like, they'll allow for failures and stuff. It's you that won't. So I think being gentler with ourselves, thinking these things through more, talking more kindly and compassionately with ourselves is a great start. Also, just like I think we talked about in last week's too, like recognizing that things take time. That it's not going to be immediate. Nothing is. And this is something, like, I'll be honest, I remind myself of this constantly, because it's just hard. You just want things to be done, especially when you're working on like learning something, and you get to that like plateau point where it gets, it's going to be probably like a few weeks, couple of months of not much progress, but more like maintenance, where like you really just, oh God, you want things to move faster, and like, but being thankful that you're able to do it, do something that you want to do. I mean, that's a great starting place. Or taking a break, go do something else, get some perspective, go take a walk, do something fun. I think, and this is one of the things I struggle with too, but like learning to enjoy our day, giving ourselves time to do things that are fun, that are good for us, hobbies, spending time with friends and family that we love, whatever. Like these things where we're actually present and not thinking about other stuff. It's something that's crucial, but it's hard to do for a lot of us.
But I'm
Yeah.
glad you mentioned that part about enjoying it, because that's something that I've been doing recently in my morning journaling. Is, I ask myself, how can I do better, which is good. But also, I started asking myself, how can I enjoy today? And
Oh, I like that. That's a good one. Yeah.
because that like primes me for the things that I know I've been looking forward to, like going to the park and sitting under the trees, or
Yeah. Yeah.
going to that exercise class that I really like to go to. The things that I know are things that I put there because I wanted to do that. It primes my brain for when I get there to actually start enjoying it. And it's been a really helpful thing to do, because then I can start I can enjoy them more, as opposed to just like going there and
Yeah.
being automatic. All of a sudden, I'm like, hey, I'm this spot where I want it to be. Let's enjoy it now, because it's not going to be here forever. And this is where I want it to be.
Yeah, I know. I really like that idea too, because it's also kind of like you're taking a moment in the morning to not to make sure that you're grateful for it, basically, to acknowledge that you have this thing that you're able to do that you wanted to do. You're not sort of taking it for granted so much. And I think that's a really good idea. I'm gonna start doing that.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's kind of like the reverse of the small delights, right? You're like kind of reversing it, doing it
I
ahead of
know
time.
but that's great. Like I heard something a while ago that like all the great speakers They tell you what they're going to tell you. Then they tell you. Then they tell you what they told you. So it's basically like doing the
Yeah.
same thing. It's like you're
Yeah.
telling yourself what you're going to enjoy. Then you enjoy it. Then you remind yourself what you enjoyed. So like you get three
Yeah.
times the benefit from the same thing. And it's a great way to enjoy
And
your
it's
day.
really, yeah, it's really being grateful and happy in the moment. It's learning to enjoy the now. I like that a lot. That's a good idea. It's funny too, it's like, and I think that's the hardest part for most of us. It's just acknowledging what we do have and taking a moment to enjoy it. Like I noticed like last week when I was overwhelmed, I took a walk and listened to a podcast that I wanted to listen to that I really enjoyed, and like it was fun. And just giving yourself time to do something like that too is really helpful. But we get so caught up in it, and I think it's too like we imagine that like if we're not stressed about it all day and doing it all day, like somehow that'll mess it up, and it's like it's going to take longer than a day. So like it's not like, most things we're working towards and most things we're working on, it's not like the day in the big scheme of things matters. It's the months, it's the years that matter, not the day. So it's like losing an hour in a day it's not the end of the world, but we act like it is. And I think that's the other difficulty.
Yeah. And it also comes up to like, well, what's the point of my life, or what's the meaning of life? Because we spend all this energy stressing about these things
Yeah.
and putting all this work into getting stuff done. And then at the end of the day, it's like, well, we're gonna die anyways. So like, is this really that important? Is
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is it as important as is it worth losing my peace of mind? Is it worth not enjoying where I am right now? Because like no matter where you are right now, you can always enjoy something. And
Yeah.
yeah, so it's just like, is this worth giving up my peace of mind? And hopefully you can get to a point where pretty much everything you do is something that you can enjoy, or you can find something enjoyable in doing it. And we were talking before we started shooting this episode about SpongeBob and about how that show teaches
Yeah.
you so many lessons, because like SpongeBob is someone
It
who
does.
pretty much whatever he's doing, wherever he is, he's enjoying it, he's involved, he's engaged, he's enthusiastic. And so like these are all
He's
things that
bright.
you
Yeah.
kind of
Like,
aspire to do and to be, because he's fully engaged with what's present right now. He's not worrying about the future or regretting the past.
yeah, no, he's in the moment 100% and fully present with the people, fully engaged and appreciative of who's around. It is funny, and I think that's the thing we all struggle with and would really be so helpful, right? Is to actually be able to like enjoy these things now, to be able to like enjoy the moment now. And it's one of the biggest challenges. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a long way
So
towards contentment, but you get
yeah,
there.
yeah. So I mean, I think it's something worthwhile to remind yourself regularly, because we're also fixated
Yeah.
on goals that we miss. I mean, we miss the journey, but also we miss the enjoyment of the journey. And I
Yeah.
remember when I was younger and my grandmother was still alive, and it's like old people, they get to be an age where they just have like the wisdom that they've been around for 80 some years, and like they've seen this stuff.
Yeah.
So I was going through some problems or whatever, and I was like, oh, my life is terrible, why do I have these problems? And she was just like, it's so you can enjoy life. And I was like, what are you talking
Yeah.
about? And she's like, well, it makes life interesting. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she's like, if this stuff didn't happen, your life would be kind of bland. If you just went from like one success to the next, and things were just good, no troubles ever, you just would stop enjoying it. So this stuff, although it's problematic and although you don't want to do it and it's uncomfortable and it's troublesome and you're just not where you want to be, it's like, this is what makes life interesting, because you never know what's going to happen.
No, it's a great point though, right? Is like that you need those struggles make it valuable. They also give you something to overcome. They give you something to prove yourself. They give you something to remind you why you're doing it and why it matters and why it's worth struggling. Because if it wasn't worth pushing through at those moments, you shouldn't be doing it. I mean, flat. I mean, so that's a great point. I like that one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the takeaway is, focus on enjoyment and patience. Give yourself more time to do it. You don't need to do it
Yeah.
today.
No.
Chances are in 3 years it'll be done. You won't even be thinking about it anymore. And
Yeah.
and just ask yourself, how can you enjoy today? And then start enjoying
Yeah.
it when it comes up.
Yeah. And be grateful for the things you do have. Don't only focus on what you don't have or what you lack. I think that's also crucial because
That's
most of us are full. We just act like we're empty,
Yeah, that's great because it's an instant mind shift. I've noticed that every time I go around my room and do that, all of a sudden there's no more feeling of lack because I realize
Yeah.
the overabundance that I already have in my life that like I just don't have enough time. All of a sudden I'm over full,
Yeah.
So like
Yeah. That's
yeah,
it becomes an issue of time, not an issue of lacking stuff or whatever. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's it. Yeah. Yeah. Did you want to add anything else?
No, that's all. I'm complete.
Cool. All right. So that's episode 127. Patience and contentment. We're all trying, right? So just be more patient with yourself. Speak more, try and treat yourself more compassionately and give yourself time, but enjoy the now. So we'll be back midweek with a quick fix, a short episode. Check us out on YouTube, listen to us on all the podcast apps. Please share, subscribe, do all that. It helps a lot. We'll be back later this week with that quick fix. And until then, later, Andy.
Later, Danny.